Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this free online open to all event. It's a collaboration between the Engineering Together and the Women's Engineering Society's Tyne and Tees cluster. This is one of a series of talks in a programme called In It Together. And this is where we aim to motivate and inspire everyone to shine and do the best that they can. And in this topic today, we're going to cover career-long learning, and I'm delighted to welcome a number of excellent presenters today to give you their insight. But first of all, welcome to the event. The event's going to be recorded, so if I can ask everyone who's not speaking to keep themselves muted throughout the event, feel free to keep your camera on, but just remember, you can switch it off if you prefer. So my name is Laura Brown. I'm the Commercial Manager for Flexibility Services at Northern Powergrid, and I'm delighted to welcome you here today. Hopefully you can see my screen okay, and I've moved on to the next slide. And just to give a little bit of a background to this session, when it comes to a career in engineering or in any sector, to be frank, keeping your skills up to date is extremely important. And what options are there when it comes to tools to update your skills? What are the experiences of the wider community, and what are employers and recruiters looking for in these skills that you're developing? And which route for learning is right for you? It's a wide area. It's a big sector, the training sector. So we thought we would dabble into this a little today, and then open the debate further by having some questions and answer sessions later on. So first of all, I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. We've got Jill Nicholls, who's Head of Construction, Built Environment, Transport and Logistics at the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education. We have Chloe Jarman, Solutions Engineer from Siemens. And we've got Chris Nolan, who's Head of Talent and Organisational Development at Northern Powergrid. The event today is facilitated by myself, who I've introduced already, and my colleague Joe Douglas-Harris from the Venator Materials. And we've got online support as well from colleagues Paula McCone and Sally Postle. Thanks very much for their support in organising and publicising the event. So I'll kick us off first with hand you over to Jill Nicholls, who's going to give us a bit of introduction to herself and talk us through some slides. Thank you. Over to you, Jill.
Thanks very much. So as Laura's already said, I work for iFate. That other title's far too long. And I've been with them 6 years now. So started when it was just IFA, Institute for Apprenticeships, and obviously it's been expanded to technical education now because we represent more than just apprenticeships. It is about T levels, HTQs, level 2s and 3s, etc. So certainly moved on in those 6 years. I was an engineer for my sins and have moved into civil service. So I think that's probably a crime in your world. But here I am nonetheless. So hopefully these next few slides just give you a perspective from our side of things in the civil service, in Department for Education in particular, as to what support there is there and what's coming down the line in terms of future support. So let's move into the slides. So I think that we have quotes threaded through the day from what I've seen from other speakers. So John Dewey certainly had quite a lot to say in this subject. So let's see if we can apply that to practice. So the first slide, please, Laura. Okay, so in case you don't know who iFate are, we are actually an arm's length body. We're not court DFE. We're always one of those bodies who can be cut at any moment in time should there be budget situations. So this is who we are. We have existed for 6 years, and we're set up to be the employer-led side of things. So we talk to employers all the time. We develop our products with employers. We don't do anything without employers say so, sign off. Verification of our work constantly. We have this vision and for a world-class and fully integrated skills system that equips people from all backgrounds for skilled occupations, because obviously that's linked to economic productivity and social mobility. As I said, employers have a huge amount of influence over what we do. They're embedded into every single product that we develop. We have around 670. That goes up and down depending on whether occupations continue to exist, occupations change, new occupations come along. So that number is probably only ever relevant on the day that I'm saying it. But those apprenticeships range from level 2 to level 7. And underneath those are pinned a number of products. Everything is pinned on that occupational standard, which is why it's so important to have employers design those for us. If you haven't seen our website, we're very, very lucky in that we are not part of gov.uk, which is just somewhere you get lost. So we have our own website. I've put a link into the presentation. If you haven't seen it, please do go and have a look. I would strongly recommend the occupational maps area. This is a new interactive area that we've got on the website, which can be tailored to individuals, tailored to sectors, and shows career paths through different funded products all the way through. So if you're starting, leaving school and you want to be a project engineer, it will show you what you need to do and how you get funded to do that and all the different options available to you. So please do go and have a play. Next slide, please. This is what the current landscape looks like. So as I mentioned, apprenticeships run right from level 2 to level 7. And then the technical qualifications are split into 2. So we've got those at level 2 and 3. So those are full-time qualifications delivered typically at FE colleges. And then we've got the HTQs, higher technical qualifications. These are a fairly new product. We have the role of quality stamping them and approving providers to deliver them. So they will submit what they're going to deliver against which occupational standard. We'll make sure the content matches that occupational standard, and they will therefore then get authorization to deliver. Underneath that, there are things that we obviously aren't responsible for, hence the slightly different colour. So things like skills boot camps. These are very much used to provide quick upskilling as things change. So there's probably the most famous one in construction, for example, is retrofit, because that's the way we're going in terms of retrofitting many of the housing stock and commercial stock that we have in terms of buildings. So you don't need to go through a full apprenticeship if you've been practicing in the sector for a long time. A skills boot camp could be the way forward, and there's obviously numerous boot camps across numbers of different sectors. All of this is underpinned by those occupational standards that we own. We don't just develop those in isolation with that handful of employers. They are done through a handful of employers who hold the pen, and then a wider consultation group. And then we obviously refer to things like engineering council standards, to professional bodies, anything like that that would influence the content and influence the outcome are all fed into those occupational standards, so that we know ultimately whatever we design is going to be accepted and supported in terms of providing somebody with an accepted outcome in terms of progressing their career. I put a little note on the bottom there because people seem to think apprenticeships are long. They can only be used for your first qualification, and that is not true at all. Any apprenticeship can be fast-tracked. We do, or well, DFE do have a rule that they must be a minimum of 1 year. It's actually 366 days to be exact, one year and 1 day. But they can be delivered in a number of different ways. The traditional way of 1 day a week isn't that common nowadays. Lots and lots of examples of block release, and lots of examples thanks to COVID. I know we don't thank COVID for much, but COVID has changed the way that we work, and it changes the way that we teach. And online teaching is very much the way forward now. So that's why us in the Northeast, who quite often don't have the provision that we're looking for, can send our apprentices to University of Exeter or University of Leeds, and they don't have to actually leave the region and experience that expense because the teaching is online. And if you do need to gather together for certain elements of the apprenticeship, block release a week away, 2 weeks away is how that can be done. So please don't rule out apprenticeships in terms of lifelong learning. So let's start to look at the future. And I chose this because the latter part of this sentence is where I think things are going. So we're going to get some new skills. We want new skills because we want to progress in our career, but combining them in creative ways is how it's starting to look, and how finally the government's catching up with what employers are asking for. So I think this is quite an exciting announcement. I know nothing out of civil service is exciting, but I think this is where we should be going. So let's have a look at the detail on the next slide. So firstly, right at the top, apprenticeships and other employer-funded training needs to be included in that as well. They will continue as per the current arrangement. They'll always be available should that be the option that somebody wants to go for. But obviously the apprenticeship has a set of knowledge, skills and behaviours, and all must be met, and therefore you have to learn them all because you have to demonstrate them at endpoint assessment, and therefore they're not going to be suitable for everybody. What is coming along is something called lifelong learning entitlement. You may have seen some of this in announced already. The consultation has been happening for a little while now, but it's applicable for anybody from 18 to 60. Even there is a clause actually that if people are over 60, there is some funding there as well. But this is non-employer funded training, and it's a single way of funding any learning that anybody wants to do after 18. So it could fund the traditional university route. It could fund, and this is the bit that I find really exciting, individual modules. So we're looking, for example, at modularizing our occupational standards at the moment. Massive piece of work, but it means that you can complete those elements of the apprenticeship that you need, not the ones that you've already got and that you don't need, but those ones that you do need, and any other program, not just apprenticeships, obviously. And this is a really, hopefully, useful way of people upskilling and getting funding, or at least a loan to upskill, because for the first time ever, we can cut qualifications up and therefore provide the modules from those qualifications that you're looking for. So it's probably like the bootcamp idea, but as I say, looking at a much wider offer. So that is not coming along till September 2025, unfortunately. And we're obviously building up towards that now. So there'll be more information available both on our website and on DFE or gov.uk website over the next few months as to how people apply and how it's going to work in practice. But ultimately, the full entitlement is £37,000, which in today's money is 4 years worth of study. That value will, I've heard from DFE, will be revised as obviously we go through inflation over the next few years. And included in that as well is a maintenance loan to cover living costs, which I think are quite rare nowadays. When I did my degree, it was fully paid by the local authority, but I don't think it is nowadays. So really, what I've tried to show you there is what's available now and what's coming down the line. But there should be systems that are funded both now and in the future for people to use towards developing their career. So I'm going to break now and I'm going to hand over to Chris and see if he can give you a far more interesting and informative presentation than I did from government. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill, and not at all. I'm sure I won't be any more interesting. I found that very interesting. I've already got a few questions lined up for you. And hello, everybody. My name's Chris Noland. I'm the Head of Talent and Organisation Development for Northern Powergrid, as Laura introduced me earlier. And Jill's just kind of talked to us a little bit there around the how of career-long learning and some of the things that are available to us. So I wanted to come at it from a slightly different angle. I'm going to try and tie this into the why career-long learning is so important to us. And to do that, if you can bring up the next slide for me, please, Laura, I'm going to draw some parallels to Darwin's theory of evolution. So we're all going down the quotes route today, and Darwin said that it's not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones that are most responsive to change. And I think that's really relevant to today's society, because a lot of people tend to associate career-long learning and career or just personal development really with career advancement and progressing their career to get to the next level. Whereas what I want to try and show you today is actually in today's society, that's not the case anymore because of the pace of change, that really we need to keep learning all the way through our career just to stay current and to stay relevant to what we're doing. So next slide, please. Thank you, Laura. First off is my kind of confession, really. I am old. That's a fact, unfortunately. I celebrated my 50th birthday earlier this year, and I got my first job in learning and development in 1996, 27 years ago. So I want to kind of take you on a journey about my career within that 27 years and take you right back to 1996. So if you could bring up the next slide for me, please. Just as I do that, is anybody on the call not even born in 1996? Just to make me feel really old, and probably some people won't even know what this is on the screen now, but anybody recognize anything from there? Maybe you will if you kind of went on a training course back in 1996. So when I started delivering training, at the top left-hand corner, everything that we shared was on acetates, a little piece of plastic that you had to put on a machine called an overhead projector and scan that across a room to a big screen in the corner. And that was how we got our messages across. There was no animation, no engagement, no interaction. It was literally just whatever we could fit on a piece of plastic. If I wanted to show a video of something, then what I had to do was wheel out a trolley, usually with a big sort of, well, I say big, in the day, 24 inches was deemed a big TV. So that was kind of as big as we got then, and with a VCR kind of underneath it. And then we'd kind of put a tape in, hope that it had been rewound, and hope that it wasn't going to get caught in the machine and we'd lose that, for example. And then the picture down at the bottom is one of my kind of first employers, which is HSBC. They used to have a management training centre at Bricket Wood. That is that building. And if you wanted to go on a course, you used to be sent down to Bricket Wood very often for 5 days or so and attend a training course in person. So that was what my life was like back in 1996. That's where I kind of cut my teeth. But obviously, things had changed quite a lot. You know, in that time, if you could go on to the next slide, please. PowerPoint was really in its infancy. No one was using it back then. It was only developed in 1987, and in 1996, only 4 million licenses had been sold. But now it's been replaced. Everything is done by PowerPoint. You know, we don't use acetates and OHPs anymore, thankfully. And if we want to show a video, all we do is embed a link to YouTube in the PowerPoint presentation, click it, and up it comes, and we watch that merrily. We don't get the opportunity to go to management training centres. That's now a housing estate. It's been sold, bought, and it's been developed on. So most of the online learning that we do nowadays is through Teams, sessions like this. It's a very, very different landscape. But I've had to learn how to use PowerPoint, how to embed YouTube videos, how to use Teams, how to send people off into breakout rooms, just to be able to do my job. And that's not going to stop anytime soon. So if you go on to the next page, please, Laura. Now, what's around the corner for us is, of course, artificial intelligence. Is my role going to be replaced completely? Are we going to need me? Is there going to be an avatar that's going to deliver this kind of stuff in the future? Already, and I've done this myself, I'll put my hands up, I've written courses through ChatGPT. So if you want a section about a certain topic, you can just put it in there. It will write it for you. You transfer it and make some tweaks. Off you go. Job's a good one. And we're already getting examples of VR learning. So a lot of the sort of manual things now where there's a degree of risk. So there are car manufacturing plants, for example, where they don't actually get out onto the production line. They've got that all recreated in a virtual reality world with augmented reality. They will use the handsets and they'll go and put things in certain places. So you're experiencing the real thing just in a virtual world. So that's the future of learning. And I'm going to have to start to learn all of these kind of techniques in my final 17 years of employment. Otherwise, I just won't be able to keep up and everybody else will come and take over me. So, next slide, please, Laura. It's really easy to do that, though. You know, the good news is that the way that we learn has changed as well, and we now have bite-sized learning. You know, really on-demand learning, not go on this course and then try and remember that for the rest of your life. It's always there. It's always being updated, and the access is it's infinite, really. There's more access to learning than we've ever had before. So all you need to do if you want to understand something is Google it, have a quick Google search. There's LinkedIn, there's lots of people post things that you might get new, fresh insights or learning from. And there's LinkedIn Learning as well. We've already mentioned YouTube, and across Coursera and Udemy as learning platforms, there's over 20,000 free courses that you don't have to pay for at all. Just go on, click, do the course. It's all there. There's apps to help us learn now. There's on Spotify and podcast channels, there's lots of educational business podcasts that can give us new insights, new learning into things that we would challenge our thinking on, basically. And then there's audiobooks as well. You don't have to you subscribe to an audiobook service and listen to it whilst you're walking the dog or driving to work, whatever it is that you want to do. So you can get the access to learning however now. And it's really important that we can get that because, as I said, the world of work is changing too. So, Laura, if you want to put up the next slide, please. In recent research, some of the biggest, most in-demand jobs of today did not exist when I got my first learning and development job back in 1996. So some of those things in there, drone pilot, data scientist, blockchain developer, SEO specialist, these weren't a thing because the internet hadn't been invented. Some of these things didn't even exist a decade ago. And going down to number 10, influencer, a genuine career choice that 52% of school children have put as their number one choice for a career when they leave school. They want to be a YouTuber or a vlogger. That's quite scary, really, 52%. But maybe it's not scary. Maybe that's just me showing my age. So it's really important that we do constantly think about what's around the corner, scan the horizon and think about what do I need to learn next and get in ahead of the curve just so that we stay current and can deliver what we need to keep ahead. So next question from me then is what's next for your role or for your industry? Have a look at that, have a think about that, and that's my challenge. Take that away and think about what you need to learn. Thank you. Any questions? Or are we doing that at the end? I think we're doing that at the end. So I'm going to hand over now to Chloe.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. So my name is Chloe Jarman, and I am a solutions energy engineer at Siemens within the EPS part of the business, and EPS stands for Energy and Performance Services. Kind of going and continuing the theme of what's been said already by Jill and Chris. I fully agree with everything they want to say and what they've said. And what I really like is how Jill's gone through this is the how, Chris has gone through the why and shown you that evolution, and how I want to kind of bring in like my differences is that that pace of change that Chris was talking about. There's a quote that I feel is really strong and should be spoken about, and this is a quote from the education entrepreneur Michael Siemens to deal with the rate of change and how everything's how fast everything is progressing. So if someone is 40 years old today, the rate of change they will experience in 2040 by the time they're 60 will be 4 times what it is now. And what feels like a year's worth of change by today's standards will occur in 3 months. And so if someone who's 10 now, when they turn 60, they'll experience a year of today's rate of change in just 11 days. And from that, I find it just mind-blowing at how fast the world is progressing and how much it's changed. Just going back to what Chris was showing from when he started out to what we're dealing with now. And through that, I feel like it brings out that output. We're not just dealing with career-long learning, you're dealing with lifelong learning. And everything you're doing, so buying a new phone, you're learning something new, you're learning how to use it and what's going forward. And within my role as a solutions energy engineer, I go around industrial sites, manufacturing sites, university campuses, and my role is to identify and understand how the building is using its energy, what assets are using more energy than is necessary, what improvement measures can we implement to make the building more energy efficient, what can we do to reduce its carbon, how can we make these buildings into smart buildings and create a digital twin from it and connect all of the data from the real world and pull it into a digital world. And so with my role that I've been in, it's already fast paced and changing, and there's always new things that I have to learn and have to keep up on top with, and many ways in which what I do to try and keep up top of the keep up with the trends and everything is just to stay curious. Like, there's lots of things that I'm interested and want to know, so doing as Chris says, I go and Google it and go into YouTube and find things, because there's so much information out there that you can easily grab hold of and have a look at, and I find it's really interesting. And you just never stop learning, to be honest. Those are like my kind of with the amount of information that's going through, from the tips and things, from everything that's coming through, just being open, being curious, and remember that it's learning for always. You're always learning to do something new. And what Jill was saying about the life learning entitlement for the upskilling that will start as of September 2025, really interested to learn more about that and how that can help a load of people. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chloe. I'm going to ask, thanks very much everyone for those talks. Those are extremely interesting. And I'd like now to invite you all to come back. I'm going to share a slide for a second just to sort of make clear the rules of the game, if you like. So what we're going to do now is have some question and answers. So we really encourage everybody in the audience to type any questions you might have in the chat, and I'll field those to our speakers today. If you let us know what your question is, but also let us know who you are and what organisation you go, that's also of interest to us as well. So that would be great. But just to get us started, so I'll stop sharing that now. So just to get us started, thanks everyone for your talks. I'm very interested in what everyone said round about keeping, what is the next form of the technology that's going to be helping us keep our skills up to date. So my question to you all is just what do you see in your own experience or for your learning? What do you see as the next big thing that's going to help consolidate the learning that you need to do to keep up to speed with your job? Just from your own personal perspectives, I'd be interested to hear. If I go to yourself first, Jill, what tools do you use?
Yeah, it was funny when Chris mentioned ChatGPT. We are now looking at whether we can use ChatGPT to create apprenticeship standards, and actually, it's not too bad. It creates the bare bones of it, and we had a new occupation come through to us earlier this year called low carbon heating technician, and obviously providers don't have any experience of delivering it, so therefore they couldn't give us what costs it was going to be to teach it, and their guess at consumables was not great. So we used ChatGPT and basically asked it what consumables would there be in the teaching of low carbon heating technician. And we presented them back to the Trailblazer group, and they went, "Oh yeah, we forgot about that. And oh yeah, that's good. And yeah, that's good." So yeah, I hate to admit it as a fellow 50-year-old, but I'm going to have to keep up with it because this is the way it's going, and there's certainly going to be some AI policies come out in terms of assessment, because as you can imagine, for endpoint assessment in apprenticeships, AI could have an interesting influence in terms of outcomes and projects that people write and things like that. So that's where things are going, both in government and personally at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Chloe, what tools do you use to keep your skills up to date?
I use a number of different skills. ChatGPT is one of them, but I also use even things like Excel, Excel, learning all the different things, YouTube, Audible, to keep on top of like specific books that have come out, and podcasts are a huge one that I do to keep me on top of what's coming out and what's new.
Brilliant, thank you. And Chris, have you got any top tips that you haven't already shared?
Well, I probably listen to more podcasts than I watch telly now. It's a thing of the past, is TV for me. But as much as I mentioned a lot of technical or technology-based solutions there, I still like the very hands-on approach. So I still really like mentoring and asking the question, who do I know that knows this, and going to them, building a relationship and asking them for their expertise and sharing that. And in particular, because of that age differential as well, sometimes people that I know above me or older than me don't always know that I like reverse mentoring. So actually finding somebody that's a lot younger, maybe got a completely different perspective to how I'm looking at things, and just being challenged in my thinking as to, oh, well, I do it this way because my experience tells me this is the way it should be done, or I've always done it that way. And, you know, there are different ways of thinking. And sometimes you need someone from a different generation or a different background to give you that impetus to think differently. So I like doing that too.
That's great, Chris. Thank you for that. There's been a question in the chat from Paula McCone for Jill. Can employers help shape apprenticeships or other type of learning? Paula from...
Oh, yes. So many ways to get involved. I mean, the very hands-on, practical, being on a T-level panel or an apprenticeship trailblazer group, which is quite intensive. So obviously not all employers can commit to that. It's a kind of short-term intensity. There are far other ways. So obviously responding to consultations. We have a role that is a bit secret. I don't know who these people are, but we have peer reviewers. So any submission that comes into us goes out to both consultation and our root panels and peer review. And these peer reviewers are an anonymous list of people who've defined what their expertise is via CV. And when something comes in they feel they can give an informed view on, they can do that. It's a paid role. If people are allowed to do that, because I know some companies don't allow that. But yeah, there's lots of different ways, and obviously once we have done the design, then those who are delivering it, the likes of the awarding bodies like Pearson's, City and Guilds, are always looking for employer panels to make sure that their curriculum is correct, their assessment is correct. So whatever your time that you've got, we can probably find a role to suit you as an employer.
Thanks, Jill. Sounds like there's opportunities for everyone to contribute there. We've had a question from Gary Hindmarsh, and it's to any speaker. The cost of career learning can put people off developing further. That's fair. Very, very good observation. So should career development be employer-led or individual-led?
I'm happy to start with that one.
Yes, Chloe, thanks.
Personally, I think for career learning, specific to your roles and the additional ones, it should be career-led, and Siemens are very good with that. Like, we have a minimum of 50 hours of learning that we're mandatory that we have to do, and that can be on anything we want, from soft skills to anything specific to our particular role or anything new. And I find that really helpful and really good for learning for the future and trying to keep up with this pace.
Chris, what do you feel about that?
I was going to say, I think it depends upon the size and the financial stability of your employer, obviously. But if you're working for a good, decent-sized employer, I would hope that they would have that funded into their budgets. I know certainly from a Northern Powergrid perspective, we've got a good learning budget, I'm pleased to say, and we have our funded learning policy as well. So if you want to achieve a qualification that can't be achieved through the apprenticeship levy, then we will fund people to get those qualifications at whatever level that might be, and just as long as they sign an agreement to that, so that we get a return on the investment, but we will pay for that 100%.
I don't know if Jill, if you can give some background to that apprenticeship levy. Is that something that you've got a bit of knowledge of, or maybe Chris can explain it a bit more, because it's not. It's not.
The apprenticeship levy is basically a tax that employers pay, and that money then goes back into the pot in order to fund any apprenticeship training that any size employer wants to do. Obviously, some have large levy pots, some have none. So it tends to get spread around and shared with the devolved nations. I think that's important to say as well. But I think there isn't an apprenticeship for every ask, and therefore, as Chris says, it's great for employers to have that alternative consideration. We certainly do in the civil service, in that you put forward what learning you want to do, and then it's taken to an L&D committee, and they decide if it's appropriate to your role, and that budget is allocated accordingly. But yes, apprenticeship levy is sadly a tax.
So for the next question, Chris actually posed it, I think. Is that right? Yep. Chris, yes. Do you want to ask Jill directly rather than me?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Because I hadn't heard about the LLE before, so it's useful to get that learning. I'm going to find out a lot more about that. But one thing that struck me was there's the student loan scheme at the moment, and what you were describing sounded as there was similarities there. So how does LLE differ from that? Is it going to replace it, work alongside it, and if so, how?
Yeah, it's from what I understand, it's all going to be absorbed into this one big LLE, because obviously student loans at the minute are only for HE in the main. So this is a much bigger system. Certainly it'll encompass student loan company. I would assume the people who work for them know this and haven't announced something that they're going to lose their jobs. But yes, it will go for everything from modular, like one module at level 2 to a master's degree at level 7.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
There's a question from Paula again, and it's a question to Chris. As someone who's also your age almost, I was surprised that over half students want to be influencers. What has surprised you most about the
about the kind of pace of change, or the jobs that are now coming up? Or I think in terms of the purest answer to that, what surprises me most when it comes to learning is some people's belief that they have got to an age such as mine and think that they're now past learning. They don't need to learn anything else, or they don't have the capacity to learn anything else. I don't agree with that at all. I think it comes down to one thing and one thing only, and that's motivation to learn. My parents, who are now in their 80s, constantly talk about being too old to take on new things. They won't do internet banking because they're too old to learn how to do that. It's like, but all of the banks are shut. You've got no other option. You just need to learn and get on board. So it's having the motivation to learn and enjoy learning. It's fun. You're getting something new out of it.
Yes, that's a great point. There's a question for Chloe as well from Paula. The quadrupling of time makes me feel even older than Chris. As someone with it, I'm guessing with energy, what do you think that will, or someone in energy, what do you think that will mean for the opportunities for a future workforce? Chloe?
The way in which the energy industry is changing, you're still going to have more jobs coming out. There's going to be even more aspects. So rather than just the traditional dealing with your fossil fuels and aspects, you now have to deal with the new renewable side of energies that's being poured out through your grid for decentralized energy systems, for how the building is using its energy and energy efficiency. And from what I've seen so far, when it's dealing with energy, even energy markets, more roles are coming out of the woodwork from it through the workforce side of things rather than just standards. And I think that's the same for a lot of other aspects. As Chris was saying, there's a lot of roles that didn't exist 20 years ago that exist now, the main ones, and that's just going to keep changing as we go forward. So there will be some roles, I think, maybe further down the role where AI might take more of a lead than an actual person, but I reckon you'll still need people for more of the human interface sections and actually being able to understand what AI is producing out and how to deal with any losses and errors that you wouldn't necessarily identify.
Yeah, that's a good point. Exactly. AI can go so far, but still needs a little bit of calibration, shall we say, with someone who's living the real world. So there's a great question from Katrina in the chat. So Katrina said she's a project engineer from Merson, and she's a question for Jill. And the question is, will the lifelong learning allowance be available to people who already have student loans? Oh my goodness, good question.
From what I've read, yes. As long as you haven't topped out on that £37,000 allowance, then yes, you can top it up until you get there.
Okay, that's great, thank you. And then there's a question from Joe. For anyone, how can employees persuade workplaces of the value of career-long learning if it isn't something they currently see value in? So if you're an employer who doesn't see the value, how can you as an employee help influence that, change minds, hearts and minds? Do you think? What's your top tips?
I'll pick that up. I think ultimately it's about your employee value proposition. If you want to be attractive to new and prospective employees and to retain your existing employees, you have to demonstrate a learning culture. Basically, we know from what's attractive to potential candidates nowadays. Gone are the days of job for life. People don't look for that anymore. That whole stability, security. What they look for is the opportunity to grow, develop, and progress their career. Not necessarily with that same company, but so that they build the skills so that they can go on and do that. And they will thank organisations that they've worked for that have given them that opportunity. So if you want to be the first employer of choice, you've got to support that. Really. It pays for itself.
Yeah, so it's almost a recruitment and a retention benefit to that. Yeah. Chloe, do you have any thoughts on this? So you've mentioned you're in Siemens, who've obviously found out possibly the hard way that the best way is to have these sort of mandatory training. But is there how would you what would you recommend people do to sell it to who are not in that same position?
It's a very good question. It's like the 50 hours, it's not 100% mandatory. They want you to do it. So you don't have to do 50 hours, but they really want you to aim to do at least 50 hours a year of training and learning, because everything that's coming through and being there, you need to understand what's going on. And it's not just associated with courses, it's also associated with doing lean-ins with people or doing like little TED Talks, and those like 15 minutes and the bite-sized learnings, they all come up to that output. Trying to talk to other employers and how you could get them to do it. I think it's more just showing, well, as Chris was saying, that you should realize that in order to attract new talent and people, they're going to need to be able to keep their career progressing and have that availability for courses to go forward. Otherwise, you'll lose people. Yeah,
that's a really good point. I think it's extremely valuable if people feel they're going backwards. Sorry, Chris, go.
I was just going to say the other thing is to build it into kind of your reward and recognition frameworks as well, and your internal recruitment and progression. Make sure that the people that you are promoting are those people that have the right aptitude and that have demonstrated that passion for learning, have continuously learned. So it's not just a case where the people that get promoted are those that have tenure, and they're the ones that have been there longest, and it's their turn to get that next role. It's about having the best person in that job. So make sure that those people that do continue their learning journey get rewarded by getting on. And then people start to see the value in it and go, oh, right, okay, if I'm going to get that, then I need to do that too. So it takes the ownership away from a lot of the questions about what can a company do, it's down to the individual. They've got to take ownership and accountability for their own learning, and those that do should be rewarded for doing so.
That's great, and I can personally speak to that. I've been rewarded by taking it on my back by moving, pivoting careers, and that was based on learning that I had done off my own back. So yeah, it's very important, especially if you want career progression or career change. There's a question from Joe in the chat. Learning could be technical or soft skills, as we've mentioned. So do the teachers, do the speakers have any thoughts on the comparative benefits of each? So soft skills versus practical technical skills.
I think it's a great question. And I think the way that we design occupational standards reflects that they're all just as important as each other. So we have knowledge, we have skills, and we have behaviours. And the behaviours are just as important as those technical knowledge and skills areas. And some great companies really throw a lot into that behaviours element and a lot of investment personally, way and above what the apprenticeship would pay, in making sure that the values people develop and the behaviours they demonstrate are really, really embedded, because they underpin everything else. And interestingly, I'm working with the Construction Leadership Council at the minute and the Industry Competency Committee on something called competency framework. So they're defining post-Grenfell what competency looks like in every single occupation. And I had a fear in the original conversations from some of the trade bodies that they were just going to go down the knowledge, skills and experience route. But they now have SCEB statements, so skills, knowledge, experience and behaviours. So it's great to see that behaviours are linked to competence, not only from us inside DFE, but obviously from employers recognising that, and obviously the building safety regulator and CLC recognising that as well. So there's benefits obviously in each, and I think everybody recognises that.
Great answer, thank you very much. Does anyone else want to add anything to that?
I was going to say exactly the same. You can't say one's more important. You should kind of continually do both throughout your career. But agree, the ultimate benefit is the application of the technical knowledge or the skill. It's no good. One of my previous managers used to a kind of phrase that he stuck with me called badge collecting. People that go on training courses for training courses' sake, so they can tick a box and say, I've done that. What have you done with it? That's the most important question. And how have you changed personally? What are you now doing differently to what you were doing before? So as long as they are applying that, then that's where the benefit comes, whether it be technical knowledge or skill.
That's an excellent point, by the way, because it's not just about the individual having some career path. It's just that the benefit that the development of that person has had and the impact of their work, isn't it? It's what they've actually, how they've been able to do their job better or expand the scope of the role by being more skilled. Yeah, it's an excellent point.
Now, one of the questions that I get asked most often as a training manager is, can you send me a list of all the courses that I could go on? And my response is normally, no, I can't. Can you send me a list of the needs that you've got for development, and I'll tell you what you can do to match those needs.
That's an interesting viewpoint as well, isn't it? We're kind of coming near to the end of the time, but so if there's any more questions, I just quickly encourage everyone to pop them into the chat before we run out of time. But I've got one just based on what Jill mentioned about behaviours being very much recognised now. Not that it wasn't known that you need to have good behaviours in the workplace to have a good career, but if you could ask used to think about the behaviours that you either as an employer or as an employee in an organisation would say that investing in developing this particular behaviour would be most valuable. help you with your career. It's kind of a rant. Behaviours are such a wide scope, but what sort of ones would you think between yous could be ones to really look out for or look to develop when it comes to the modern working workplace? It's a kind of random question, so I'm going to maybe ask Chloe first, if she can think of that. What behaviours do you like to see in your colleagues, or do you see in yourself as really beneficial to helping and impacting your role?
I don't think it's just about behaviours, it's about the culture of the team and how they get on, because each person has certain behaviours. Everyone needs to have be able to trust one another. I think that's the biggest one involved. But until if somebody does something that makes you untrustworthy, then when it comes to going to work and working together, there's going to be more questions and points, and it's how people then start bringing in more of a toxicity. So just being happy and trustworthy from my perspective, and creating that culture is the biggest thing for me, and what I've seen within my team anyway.
And that comes down to reliability a little bit, doesn't it? So you gain trust by doing what you said you would when you were asked to, or helping them when they need it. Yeah, and then just not telling tales out of school as well. Just having discretion at the right times.
It's also taking being aware. So if you do something that's failed and it's not worked quite well, it's owning that and being this is not done. So then you've owned that, and you're like, okay, what can we do to make it better? How can we do that? And by having that kind of mentality, like, failing is not bad. Failing, you've just learned a way not to do something in that way. You've learned how you can learn to make it better, and you can progress. And that's another way of learning. And it's just having that openness.
Yeah, that personal ownership for your that's great. That's a great answer, Chloe. Thank you. Jill, any thoughts on what behaviours you like to see in colleagues or employees?
Yeah, I think it's linked in a way in valuing others, and recognizing that everybody has a contribution. We all have different life experiences, different qualifications, different ways of seeing things, and we can all bring that to a team to really make a team work. And you can, what I've tried to do with my team, I think I've got a team of 10 now, is not really stick to the job descriptions. If somebody's better at something than somebody else, or somebody enjoys something, it's probably a better way of putting it, something more than somebody else, then why not, mix it up and let people bring their best? Because if they bring their best or personal best, then the motivation's there, the enjoyment of being at work, because obviously we spend more time with these people than we do our families, that's there as well. So definitely valuing everybody's contribution as equal is really important in my team. And funnily enough, I know this sounds corny given what we're doing today, but we're writing CPD, the value of CPD, into every occupational standard now, in the behaviours that everybody needs to demonstrate why it should be done, why it's important, and demonstrate that even during their apprenticeship they've carried out some CPD.
So CPD, for anyone who doesn't know what CPD is.
Sorry, yes. Continuous professional development.
Yeah, thanks, Jill. Chris, any thoughts?
Just to pick up on the word that Chloe used earlier in terms of behaviours is curiosity. I think that's a really important one for people to genuinely show an interest and desire to keep learning and improving themselves, and then passion and positivity. I think they're two things that they don't require any talent. It's just an innate thing that people can bring. It's how they show up, and I think that's more important than anything else, because like Chloe was saying, you don't want people that have that toxicity and negativity bringing the rest of the team down. That one person can make a bigger difference than everybody else altogether. So yeah, it's how they show up.
Great, thank you very much for that. We've got one last question in the chat, and then we'll wrap up for the afternoon. Lunchtime's coming to an end. So for lifelong learning, this is from Joanne from the WES Committee, and also in the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation. I'm so pleased to remember that one. Lifelong and career learning may mean a career change, not just developing roles. So in that instance, Could this be used to the advantage to the individual or the business? Are the things discussed today relevant to career change too? We don't always know what we want to do at 18 and choosing when you choose your degree or certainly choose your first job. Any thoughts on that? About career change and the other elements we've been discussing today?
Yeah, completely. I would again go back to some of my my career highlights as well, and that is that you don't, knowledge can be learned. It's relatively quick is knowledge transfer. Skills a bit longer. We talked about the difference between the two earlier, but skills are transferable. Knowledge is specific to a role or a sector, but you can learn that quickly. So it's really important to remember that. I changed from learning and development and financial services into going to operational management in elderly care, and I needed to understand all the different regulations of that industry, which I'd never worked in before. There's manuals, you can read that, learn it, pick it up, no problem. But my job was managerial and leadership, so I had that as a skill set in the background. So it's quite easy to make those transitions. I've moved then into manufacturing as a people director. My career has been predominantly learning and development. As I mentioned, I hadn't had core HR as a skill set, but I had people under me that did have that. So as long as you've got the leadership, you can move around, and I would say don't be scared or afraid to push yourself to do that. You will always be able to learn it.
Okay, that's a great answer, Chris. So just mindful of time, so I'm going to wrap it up now, if that's okay. So I'll just again make sure I've got my slides ready, and just to thank everyone, thank our speakers today. And I've done it again. I keep closing down the slide pack instead of sharing it. Give me 2 seconds. So I just wanted to thank everyone today for their time, their excellent presentations, and thanks the audience for their time and the excellent questions. As mentioned earlier, we are recording the session today, and you'll be able to pick that up in the next few days. Once it goes live, we'll put that on the Engineering Together YouTube channel. We'll also share the slide pack as well, so you can get access to those links that what some of the links that were embedded in there. But again, thank you to Jill, Chris and Chloe for your excellent contributions today. And thanks to the team at Engineering Together and West Tyne and Tees for hosting us this morning. Thank you very much, everyone, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Welcome, thanks.
Bye all.
Thanks everyone. Bye.